Scott Goldberg, thank you so much for
Yes.
joining us on the
Thank you.
podcast. We appreciate you taking the time.
Sure, thank you guys for having me today.
For sure. So first of all, you are a mysterious motherfucker. It is hard to find info on you, and I applaud you for that. Like I
seek to live my
aspire
life that way. Yeah.
I aspire to your level of come find me on the internet. Like it's hard.
But I have a feeling all that's going to change after Forest Hills. I'm really excited about this movie, man. It's had my interest and it's piqued me for a while because I'm friends with Wesley on Facebook and all that, and I've been seeing little bits of involvement for a long time, and I've been watching it sort of develop from the sidelines, and it's looking to be a badass movie, man. I'm really excited to see it.
Very much.
Tell us what you can about Forest Hills right now.
Sure. So the Forest Hills is sort of like a different type of thriller slash horror movie. You know, does involve a werewolf and elements of that, but it's completely different. It kind of reflects on the old thrillers of the 70s and horror films of the 70s, where it's more of a psychological horror. And yeah, it's basically about a man named Rico who ventures into the Catskills woods and basically endures head trauma, and because of that, he's very persuadable, I guess, in a way where he, certain people in his life take advantage of him, and it's sad, but it's also horrific. It's also creepy. So yeah, we wanted to kind of do something different, and it's pretty much a horror thriller that basically delves into like that type of element. Just trying to do something different rather than copying the same thing that's been done, like with many independent werewolf films and stuff like that. So we kind of want to do something completely different at this point with that, because anyone can make an independent horror film that involves werewolves, but how do you make it different? How do you trendset or try to trendset type of film? Yeah,
sure. But with werewolf movies specifically, the major challenge is the monster itself, right? You can get away with cheap vampires,
right,
cheap zombies, but when you do a werewolf movie, that's a mountain you got to climb. So how did you approach designing the monster and the werewolf for the movie on an independent level?
Yeah, so Scott Hansen, the producer who also shot the film, he had a werewolf a costume basically for a lot of his other projects that he did, and he had used that, I think, in a few of his other. I don't know if it was one or two or three or just a couple of his projects, and so we had that accessible, and he said, I have a werewolf costume. Said, okay, well, let's use it, and there's kind of like a cool little twist that you'll see towards the end of the film that has to do with the whole aspect of the werewolf. So once it comes out, I'm sure you guys will see kind of just like a unique spin on how to approach a film like this when everything's been done, as far as, or mostly it seems like everything's been done in the subgenre, I guess, of werewolves.
So I'm going to take it back. So you said Rico is the main character in this.
Correct.
Is that the same Rico from Off the Grid, or is this a totally, because Off the Grid I know is a documentary. It's billed as a documentary.
Okay.
So is this that same Rico, or is this a completely independent story of that? Is that just a name you like using as your protagonist?
Yeah. So it's funny because Chico Mendez, who plays a character in the film, I know it could sound the same, right? So his name's Chico Mendez, and funny enough, I wanted to do a book on him, and he said, listen, I don't want to use my name. It's like trade, because he trademarked it and stuff. He's like, I'm writing my own book down the road. He's like, what about like picking a name, Ricky? I said, well, Rico. So that kind of became a little thing where in a bunch of now and in the films, like, I just felt it was a good name, and he kind of spurred that idea of not going with his name but picking a different name. I think it works well for the character. So yeah, Off the Grid was a film that me and Chico Mendes did in 2018 when he was living in his van at the time, and living off the grid just follows survivalist filmmakers who are trying to live off the land and live in their RVs and make movies and documentaries, and just a couple, like two different stories, this guy Lee and this guy Chico, and how different they are, and how they go about things differently. So yeah, with their movies and what they're trying to do to achieve analog films through analog means, like VHS and Super 8. So it kind of is a throwback stuff.
Hell yeah. No, we have a love for shot on video stuff. So
yeah.
just anybody doing analog stuff always makes me happy.
Yeah, it's always
Um,
exciting, at least a little bit
so-
more tactile.
So how does the Forest Hills the feature relate to the Forest Hills the short from 2008? Is it?
Yeah. Yes. So the short film that I did was, back in 2006 or 2007, 2008. Back then, before high definition came, there was a camera called the DVX 100, which a lot of independent filmmakers like myself shot on. There was like a standard definition video with DV tape, and we would film on it and stuff. And so it was kind of like a generic storyline, like these two Kentucky hillbillies in the woods who were lovers, were outcasts of society, so they basically would kill anyone who would come in the woods. It's like the generic horror storyline that happens. So that's kind of what the film was, and I've always liked the title. And when we went into contract with D. Wallace, it used to be called Howl, and contract, we went along with the fact that it cannot be too close to The Howling, because people would think that it has to do something with The Howling, or it's direct connection to some degree because D. Wallace was in The Howling. So we had to change it, and I was like, man, what should I name it? And there was another film called The Forest Hills that I was thinking of doing. So it's always been a name that I've wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not. Long story short. Yeah.
So D. Wallace made you change the name of your movie.
Look, man,
I heard D. Wallace can be quite threatening when she needs to be.
She's awesome. Yeah, no, we had a great time, and the veracity she brings to the role, and just everything. She's great. I mean, really good to work with, and she's just ready to go. She's just ready and wants to do the role, and immerses herself in it. So like beforehand, during each take, she would like yell and like shake her hands and shake her body to get into the character, and that's kind of cool. Yeah, people, a lot of actors now, talent, they don't care what others think. They just want to go into the role and do their best, and she's, obviously, I don't know why people call her E.T.'s mom, maybe because of Scream 2 or something, when they mentioned that in like the horror trivia club or something. But she's, Elliot's mother of E.T., but everyone always see it online, E.T.'s mom, E.T.'s mom. So I just find that funny.
Yeah, that is what a lot of people think of. I think National Treasure when I imagine D. Wallace personally.
Okay.
Really, I think Rob Zombie films.
Well, yeah, I definitely think Rob.
Like that's where I go.
No, I mean I just think she is a national treasure.
Oh, she absolutely is a national treasure.
Not the film, just she is a national treasure.
Oh, okay. Well, so let's tell me about you, man. Like, obviously you're a New Yorker. Like, I can hear how much of a New Yorker you are. Did you grow up like in the city? Did you grow up in the state?
In suburbia, so grew up in Glen Cove, Long Island, where we're.
Yeah.
I think the main attraction here for Glen Cove at this point is Ashanti, who's an R&B singer. But yeah, I grew up in Glen Cove. I was born in Houston, Texas, but I never lived there. I was adopted, so
dude, same. I'm also adopted.
Oh, well, where you from? Where are you from?
Dude, funnily enough, I'm from, my biological family is from Queens. From Flushing, Queens, but I was adopted by people in the DC area. So I grew up in the DC metropolitan area.
How far were you from how far is DC from Maryland? Is that nearby?
So,
we're close.
So we're in Maryland. We're in a place called Frederick.
Oh, so how far from Burkittsville? Not far.
Oh yeah,
dude, that's our county.
I used to live like basically in Burkittsville.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Like right near, like it's the little middle of that old town.
A guy named Matt Blasi. We were.
Oh yeah, I know Matt.
Matt. Yeah, we were. Yeah. I think it's like 10 years ago, before the Blair Witch experience happened. I said to him, I was like, yo, we should like get together, get a computer with a DVD, go to the freaking woods, and like watch the Blair Witch Project. And that kind of, I guess, spurred the idea for the whole Blair Witch experience. Pretty cool. So I never got a chance to go, but because I've been so busy. But I heard that it's built to something really good. So I'm happy for Matt and the fact that there's such a love for the Blair Witch Project. So yeah, Ed and
his book 8 Days in the Woods, man, has done really
fantastic.
well.
Yeah. Well, so I'm sorry, I totally interrupt you, man. So you grew up in Long Island.
Right.
Were you always a filmmaker? Like, were you like when you were a little kid? Were you like, did you do the Spielberg thing where you had like a Super 8 and filmed yourself blowing up army men? Or
my mom had a Hi8 camera that she had. We'd go to like my brother's when my brother was going away to sleepaway camp, I would film. So she'd give me the camera and I would shoot like the family videos. And then that spurned into like, I'm interested in going to video production. So I went like one year to camp on Long Island, and like I think it was like near CW Post. It was I think it was Long Island, Long Island View University of CW Post, but no, it was like nearby. I think it was I don't know if it was NYIT. I think that's on Long Island. I'm not sure, but it was some sort of course, and they would teach us. I remember, never forget, the teachers, because I guess it was early '90s, so like they had a lot of like Pearl Jam on, and for some reason that song Peppermints they would play a lot, and like Aerosmith. Uh, so I remember like the people who would teach. I'll never forget. But they but yeah, so that kind of spurned from there. And then when I got into my teens, I've always like I was 16, 17, like I would go into the principal's area office. There was like a section like where I could sit in and like pop in a VHS. So I would pop in Halloween, John Carpenter's Halloween, and I would start writing down the lines and actions of that. So, and then aside from that, then like what else what else? Then from there, watching like DVDs of like Steven Spielberg with E.T., which was pretty surreal, working with D. But watching those like behind the scenes, saying this is what I want to do, this is what I want my life to be. So I did a lot of independent stuff, and then finally this past year, a friend of mine, Elliot Dresnick, put down an investment, and we made the movie on a small budget, but it was still substantial. So we were able to make a movie. It was fun.
Well, I want to touch on something you just said. You said about the watching Halloween and like writing down the lines and writing down the blocking and the action for that.
Yeah.
So a lot of my favorite creators have this thing in common, and you just kind of hit the nail on the head. Like the best example I could think of is when Hunter Thompson was like a preteen, like 12, 13 years old. He used to get his favorite books like Great Gatsby and Grapes of Wrath and shit, and he would retype them. Like he would hold them open and he would retype what he was reading, because he wanted to develop the skill of typing, like the skill of what it felt like to write. Right. And like, so was it like, so like, is when I hear you say like I would write down the action and I would write down lines, was that the kind of coming from the same place that like I want to develop what it is to actually write, to transfer the action on screen to the paper, and then vice versa,
like reverse engineer a movie from screen to paper?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, I just loved Halloween. Loved the fact that I started knowing it word for word, and I had like I think it was like the widescreen version on like VHS, I think it was, or something, or maybe they had that on like Laserdisc or something. But then like I don't know where I just remember seeing it like 2:35 to 1 ratio, and I just absolutely loved it. And so I don't know, like I just wanted, it was one of my favorite films, and I said, well, I want to write this out. It's just something to do, because I didn't really didn't really eat in the cafeteria, I didn't really have a lot of friends, so I just kind of did my own thing and had lunch and just in that room and just like would write. I didn't finish the film, but I did quite a bit of the writing and stuff. Yeah. So, it was just about creative, that's like that outlet, right? When you're in high school, kind of creative outlet.
It's interesting to me that like, that's intuitively where you went, right? Like that tells me that like from a young age, you were like, I'm going to be a filmmaker.
Yeah.
I want to talk about some of your earlier shorts, because like I said, I Nardwared you to some extent. And like not as deep as like I'm not gonna bring out like your elementary school friend somehow. Like Nardwar is fucking creepy.
No, they wouldn't return our phone calls.
Yeah, they wouldn't return our phone calls. But so the first one I want to talk about is All I Want for Christmas. I only read the description of this film on IMDb, and I am so intrigued by this. Like, because literally, I think the description of it was something like a crazy rapist is like the first line in it. And then the next line is spends Christmas with his, in quotes, daughter.
It's a Christmas movie.
Yeah, and it's a Christmas movie. Please take me there. Tell me about All I Want for Christmas.
Well, first, doot doodle doo.
Oh yeah, doot doodle doo.
Doot doo, yeah. So when you're speaking about Nardwar, no. So okay, so here's the thing. Like back then, like in the 2006 or so, when I made that, like I just had ideas in my head, and I was like, what's like the most fucked up? Okay.
Fair enough.
Okay. But ideas like what can I make a crazy film about? So there was one idea which my friend Chico played Santa Cruz, the guy who's in, who plays Rico in the Forest Hills, and a bunch of, in the documentary plays, is himself. He plays this like rapist Santa Claus who kidnaps kids and raises them as his own in like a sick way. And so he gives them like corpses of like dead hands and stuff. So it was just like really it was like a 6 minute, 7 minute short. And he just like goes around like killing little kids. It's like so stupid, but like so funny too. And I was just in a phase of like trying to make some like weird, just trying to find my voice, So
Sure.
it was kind of, that's kind of like what that little short was about. Yeah, just
you were
about
just like, how hard can I ruin Christmas for everyone?
Well,
exactly.
I'll tell you, man.
I like that.
On the very first episode of this show ever, 4 years ago now?
I don't even know. Yes.
One of the things we talk about on the very first episode of Camp Nightmare is how the only really untapped place in horror, in mainstream horror, is killing kids. Like that's a boundary that for some reason people still are like afraid to cross.
No, I feel like it's been tapped. I feel like we're there.
Not on a mainstream level though.
Oh.
Like it's still, we're getting there. Don't get me wrong, we're getting there. And thanks to stuff like All I Want for Christmas, and thanks to guys like Damien Leone and Terrifier ending with like kids dying. Yeah. But it always makes me happy. It always makes me happy to meet a filmmaker that's not afraid to kill a bunch of kids in a movie. Because it's just like, dude, you want to really fuck people up and really scare people. That's how you do it.
Yeah. On Christmas. Make it on Christmas too.
Yeah, make it Christmas and make it child
or their birthday, maybe. One of the two.
Exactly. So the next one I want to talk about, Dying for Change, the 9/11 documentary.
Yeah.
I was only able to read the synopsis of it. And are these available on YouTube at all, or?
So that's on. I think it's on VOH. If you type, dailymotion.tv. If you type in "Dying for Change," it'll pop up. That was at a point where I was watching a lot of I was listening, unfortunately at the time, Alex Jones and so there was this organization called We Are Change. I think they're still around. They were doing this stuff, and Alex Jones talk about it. And so I went to New York City because I was in college or whatever, or out of college at that point, didn't have a job, and was very, focused on like, well, oh my God, this is interesting. I want to go down there and document, maybe I could make a documentary about it. So I started getting involved and started getting sucked into the whole 9/11 truth thing, and investigate 9/11 and everything. And so I got stuck in all that and everything. And then there was this not discrepancy, but I guess this issue that Alex Jones had wanted footage, and I guess promised the We Are Change people that I would give them the footage for the documentary and they could use it for this. And then Alex Jones was like, why isn't that other person making a documentary on what I'm trying to do? So all that kind of stuff. So we had a meeting, and they basically said, we're letting you go. And I was like cursing them out and stuff. I was like young and stupid, but that was probably happened for me because I was able to get out of the situation and kind of get my mind back on, thinking at a more of a track where I felt I wasn't angry all the time and pissed off, and because it's very easy to go down a rabbit hole.
Oh yeah,
real information, misinformation, whatever the case is. It's really tough to go down that rabbit hole and get back out of that. So thankfully I was able to, and it was just about people who were kind of looking to figure out in their minds what they felt happened with 11 and whatnot and stuff like that. So that's what it was.
I mean, that's a great story though, man. I appreciate that, because now listen, there's a lot of people that got duped between 2001 and now. And the thing about 9/11 conspiracies is that something's up.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know what it is, but there's something about that whole scenario that's not being there's a narrative that's not being told, right? And the really insidious thing about that that I think people like Alex Jones sort of jumped on is that it only takes a little bit of misinformation to create a huge conspiracy, right?
Right.
And it only takes a little bit of truth to give something legitimacy, right? Or to delegitimize the government's stance on stuff. It only takes them lying about one thing for everything they say to be bullshit.
Right.
And I think that people like Alex Jones thrive on shit like that. Well, if this one thing is untrue, then I can create my own narrative of what happened. And it's at least as true as this misinformation, right?
Yeah.
So I'm impressed to hear someone like you tell that narrative that, man, I got sucked into this and this is how, right? Like,
Right.
more people need to hear that. More people need to hear rational people say, like, man, it's really easy to go down a rabbit hole, especially when you're hurt and you're grieving and you really just want answers, right? Like, and how many people get to say they cursed out Alex Jones?
Most people can say that, but he can say he did it like to his face. Like
Yeah.
everyone does it like in their car.
Well, no, my apologies on the misinformation. Yeah, so okay, let's backtrack. So no, so what happened was there was the We Are Change organization. Alex was
Got you.
that I was, documenting. These like, well, why? Who is this person doing? Blah blah. And so yeah, it was just an organization. I didn't say say it to his face, but I will say
Got
this:
you.
someone's a very smart business person. He knows how to use fear mongering to make people buy supplements, buy this, that. So it's unfortunate people get sucked into that, but
people forget that he was a legitimate journalist in the 90s. Like, he was a legitimate, like, he was a media entity in the 90s. I don't remember who he worked for exactly, but he worked for a fairly legitimate media source. And, he was like a VJ level, right? Like, he wasn't like doing hard hitting CNN stories, but he was at least not a crazy conspiracy theorist in the 90s and had some legitimate credentials as a journalist. And you're right. He figured out at some point that he could make an infinite amount of money, siphoning off the public's fear.
Yeah.
All right. So that was
So like Alex Jones is extremely hairy, so I feel like that's a transition to a werewolf film.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk more about the Forest Hills, the feature that's coming out.
Yeah, because you have a really exciting cast. For this movie.
This cast is stacked, dude.
Talk to us first about Edward Furlong. Working with Edward, what's that like?
Yeah, I've been a fan of his for a long time. Troy Rock City, Brains,
Terminator 2. Yeah.
Of course. I grew up on that film in the theaters, eating popcorn, drinking soda, looking at this kid and Arnold Schwarzenegger being one of my favorite films of all time. So then in college, I saw Detroit Rock City and loved that film. And, and Brain Scan came later, but like loving that film as well for what it is, a dark, mid 90s, CD-ROM horror film, kind of thing. So, I sought him out.
Yeah, we call that tech horror.
Yeah, tech horror, exactly. No, I sought him out because I'm a fan of his. Dee Wallace, same thing. Shelley Duvall, same thing. But yeah, Eddie's cool. Different process than Chico, as far as acting. I did notice, obviously it's an indie film, so I think him learning it on the spot. I think he enjoys doing that and doing that. And Chico has, I think, like a different process, and every actor has a different process. But yeah, there's a difference between actors, right? Like Chico's more of, he memorizes it through certain words that he remembers or will think about. He's like, okay, so I'm going to take this paragraph and I'm going to break it down like the word fear, and then deer, and then like house, and then like ending it with something. So he remembers through those little pieces. Whereas I think Eddie, I don't know his process per se, but I think he does more. He's more of like it's just different, and there's a different aspect to Eddie in the way his mouth moves and how he like talks and ends his sentences, and that's Eddie Furlong. It's the way that he presents himself and the way that he speaks and that tone and that dialect, and that's what I love about it. I'm a big fan of his, and so working with him was surreal for sure. I would definitely first time I met him, it was definitely like, whoa. And then once we started working together, it was like a friend, so that was really cool. Dee Wallace was really sweet as well. And Shelley Duvall, I directed her through my phone, so video chat, like FaceTime. So
interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, because at the time I was very busy and I just couldn't make it to Texas. I honestly don't like flying, so figured easiest just to kind of direct you.
I get it.
Yeah, so
all her stuff was shot with a separate crew out there, or did your crew go?
My crew went. Yeah, we had a limited crew. Scott Hansen, Steve Willenda, he did some grip and lighting, and Chris Roll, who was our sound person. They all went out to they all work together under Digital Thunderdome, Scott Hansen's company. They all went from Atlanta. Sometimes it was driving, sometimes I flew them out, you know. So yeah, but they all went out there and did it that way, you know. And they I would get on FaceTime and just hop on and I listen and watch the the through the FaceTime. I'd watch the camera, and I talk to Shelley through there, and yeah, so that's pretty much the process of working with Shelley Duvall.
That's amazing. So, how did you convince her to join the film when this is, I think, her first film in 20 years? Is that right?
Yeah. So it's first in about 20 or so years. Yeah, I just contacted her partner Dan, and then through there, contacted his cell phone. He gave me her number. I just was very persistent. I asked her. I said, we'd like to, get you involved in this film. We want you to play the role of the mother, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just kind of at that point, up in the air until the last minute. I mean, we had gotten her, I think, a couple weeks into uh after having contacted her. So yeah, so and she was, it's kind of like the thing, like where you say, okay, we're going to be here and this is the day, and we'll see you then. And even then it was like, is this going to happen?
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, that was I know that she's been through a tremendous amount of shit in the last like 20 years. And so like that was what you just answered was going to be my question, that like was it up to the minute? You were like, "Oh man, I hope she shows up for shooting today."
Yeah, exactly. It was that. And we worked around her schedule and location, and we were just able to, I think the first time we shot with her, which was going to be the only time, it was just going to be like a quick cameo where she was part of like kind of like a flashback of Rico, and just talking to him. And she said to she said to Scott Hansen, she said, man, I would really love to act with someone again, like on camera.
Wow.
So then,
Oh.
oh shit, let's do it again. So then we built off from there. It was like an organic building of the character and the scenes that took place. And then Felissa Rose from Sleepaway Camp got involved because we needed someone to play a doctor in one of the scenes with her and stuff. And yeah, so it's pretty much that's what it was like working with Shelley. She was really, from talking to her on the phone, very sweet, and it was just surreal for sure. Yeah, she's great.
So it seemed like she was having a really good time then, like getting back into the something she hasn't done in so long. What was that energy like?
Yeah, no, she's smart, very, very on point, um, funny, witty, she just loves it. And she definitely uh, deserves the praise and love that, there's so many people after we like, finished filming with her, like on Twitter and on social media, like calling her queen, the queen is back. It was just crazy, like just seeing everyone's like responses on Twitter and like, she's in a new movie and this and that. It's funny. It was funny seeing like the Forest Hills. I type it in on Google and it would just show like the Forest Hills Queens. That's all it would show. And all of a sudden, once the trailer hit, which unfortunately rushed a little bit, once the trailer hit, then it starts. I type in the Forest Hills again. It starts like showing the trailer, and it starts showing articles and Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, and it just trickled down from that one article. And then from there, it's just like everyone's covering that. We're getting freaking, emails and phone calls from Fox and CNN, and they want, a statement. So just, I mean, it completely, in my opinion, saved the film,
Yeah.
completely. Because, while Edward Furlong and Dee Wallace are great, the fact that Shelley's coming out from retirement after 20 years to act in a thriller slash horror film, that I think definitely sparked the interest to where, okay, now, we're riding off we're piggybacking off of that situation as an independent film that literally, was made without knowing anything, so we're just hoping that it continues to go on that course and trajectory of, I guess, becoming something that we hope will be, a cult classic. So, you can hope. And, I mean, my idea of like whenever I watch horror movies, it's like I just watch these movies and I say they copy the same shit over and over. I want a chance to fucking do something. So thinking of an idea and how can I make something original? How can I do something and show like how to make a movie that's dark and creepy and, trying to do something like that. And, that's kind of been my goal and aspirations. If I ever got something funded, that would be my goal, is to not copy what's been done and to share the voice of what I feel like horror fans want to see, which is something that's original, dark, and and has elements of like kind of like a John Carpenter film, like slow burn, like a Kubrick film, slow burn, and things start unfolding as that goes along. So that's kind of like what this film is. It's a slow burn throwback to thrillers of like the '70s and early '80s. So that's kind of like what the film is. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Ari Aster as a more modern director that kind of has the same mindset where,
Right.
you know,
They kind of have it. He has a Kubrickian thing.
Yeah, and
There's like this overwhelming sense of dread in his films.
I equate him more with like Polanski. I think
Sure,
he's
yeah.
more similar to Polanski. But yeah, there's definitely a Kubrickian thing. But I love the idea of high drama with horrific elements, right? That's not like what Ari Aster does. You could argue maybe Hereditary is a straight up horror film, but like Midsummer, I would argue is not a horror film. It's a high drama with a lot of horrific shit.
Yeah, melodrama. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I love seeing that sort of thing explored more. The idea of like just because it's a genre film doesn't mean that it can't have like stronger bones to it, right? It doesn't. Not everything has to be a super formulaic slasher film.
Mm-hmm.
Those are fun,
Yeah.
but it's also fun to sort of flesh things out and draw things out and make it more psychological and make it more. I have to spend time thinking about what's happening and the motivations for what's happening.
And I feel like there's a lot of like where I love werewolf movies, because they for something so simple and archetypal, there's a lot of very different werewolf movies out there, right? And even recently, I feel like The Cursed was a very interesting take on like the werewolf approach. When you go into this movie, are there notes that you feel like you need to hit as making a werewolf movie, or are there notes that you're like, I have to avoid this one thing?
Yeah, avoiding definitely like the whole getting bit in, transforming. I guess the main inspiration was, for what we need to do is no CGI, we create prosthetic, hand effects and things like that, where you can make something, believable, where you're not using CGI or anything like that. So there's elements where there's like partial transformations where we use like hand effects, elongating hands, like kind of like American Stuff in London, the claws that come out of fingernails, stuff like that. So those are the elements. And then just using, I guess, prosthetic teeth and, and acting, I mean, that's really it. And then you have the werewolf that shows up and stuff here and there. Yeah. So it's those elements and just kind of staying away from the whole generic getting bit in and transforming at the next moon and shit, like it's been done.
Right.
Yeah.
Overall, but as you said about slashers, right? Like there's a place for that, right? Like, I mean, everyone loves it, whether it's modern or whether it's old. Like, I love Stage Fright from from the late '80s. I love Slumber Party Massacre, but maybe not two. That's a little hokey, but I mean, that's fun too. With the guitar.
No, yeah, no guitar playing driller killer for you.
Oh,
okay, yeah. Too many musical numbers.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing is that like so in the '80s, like if you made a shitty slasher, it probably did well. If you made a really shitty slasher, it became a fucking cult film, right? Like, and it just boggles my mind that that's the only period in genre history where like you didn't have to worry about making a truly terrible film, because if you did, it was eventually.
Hey, I love Pieces as much as the next guy.
But like, no matter how bad an '80s slasher you make, at some point within a decade, some pretentious teenager is going to be like, no, you guys just don't get it. And it's like, no, I get it. It's a bad movie. Like, it's not good.
Right. I agree. No, I mean, yeah. And there's a place for everything, right? Like, there's going to be filmmakers who want to do a generic film. There's going to be and there's going to be some that aren't. Like, I don't know. Like, after doing this film, like, I want to do a straight up fucking gore fest camp, horror movie, because
hell yeah.
I think that would be fun. I think it would be cool, and trying to do a unique spin on it. Obviously, it's, I'm going against what I'm talking about, but, this was not a horror film in the sense of gore. This is a horror film in the sense of and also other elements. You have horror elements, but it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily like a straight up, like, it's not like Terrifier 2, like with like straight up gore, dismemberment, things like that. But yeah. So, yeah, we get a fun time making it. Yeah.
So what are we looking at as far as a release schedule for Forest Hills? When can Polite Society see this movie?
It's a independent film, so obviously distribution at this point is good. So we have the film finishing up, and then we'll going to go with some distributors and sales agents and see like where it can land. But right now, March 11th, 2023, Smodcastle Cinemas, Kevin Smith Theater in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey. Right,
Hell yes.
Kevin Smith is doing a Q&A along with Edward Furlong will be there. Maybe some other people like Felissa Rose, but it really just depends. Yeah, so we have that March 11th. It's premiering there, 250 theater, yeah, and then Orpheum in Socrates, New York, where the film was shot on March 12th. So that's going to be New Jersey on the 11th, and March 12th on in Socrates, upstate New York, in the Catskills. Yeah.
Dude, I was just reading an article about the Smod Castle maybe yesterday. I knew that Kevin Smith was doing something with Smodcast in Highlands, and I thought that it was originally just supposed to be like a giant studio for, all of the 38 podcasts that he hosts. And I read all about Smodcastle yesterday, and like, God bless Kevin Smith is all I have to say. Like, that is a dude who has like done the entire circle of fame.
Yep.
As a filmmaker, right? And like at this point, he's just has nothing left to do but to give back
He's a
to
champion
independent
for
film,
independent
right?
cinema. Yeah.
But thank God he's the person that he is, right? Because I think that's his mindset now, is that like, okay, I've literally cannot get more famous than I am, so now it's my turn to like give other filmmakers the opportunity that like I wasn't necessarily given as an early, you know what I mean? Like when you think about his story of how he had to, shop clerks at Sundance and how like they didn't even want to let him in, and
Right.
like what he had to go through. And now he's created this place in Highlands, New Jersey, where fucking like someone like yourself can take a film there, and like that's a huge step.
Yeah, no, I see some of the Q&As. I know Terrifier 2 did a Q&A, which is pretty cool to see. And yeah, I mean, Kevin's great. I mean, he gives that opportunity. I think they had the film festival recently too that they did the first year, which is cool. And yeah, I mean, we're excited. Yeah, so about this opportunity to work with Kevin and have his film. I tried to get him in the film, but I was like, we want to use the lobby to the theater where Rico gets fired or something, but he just wasn't available at the time. Yeah. So or so says, or the agent says, but yeah, no, Kevin's cool. We're looking forward to the screening for sure. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
That's exciting. Well, we're excited to eventually see the movie wherever it lands. I'm sure it's going to be somewhere great. Thank you so much, Scott, for coming on the show and talking about it.
Thanks everyone for the support, and we hope to keep independent horror going with some cool ideas and unique ideas. And I appreciate the time that you guys had today, and thanks so much.
Yeah, man.
Hell
thank
yeah,
you,
dude. Hell
All
yeah.
right. Thanks so much, Scott.
Yeah, dude,
appreciate
thank
you.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks so much, guys.